All right, folks. Very nice to have you, Aaron. Aaron, we are so happy, so delighted, and excited to have you here. I've been following your career. I think we've spoke on few conferences together, and you've been in digital marketing probably as long as I have. And Aaron Goldman is the CMO of 4C Insights. So Aaron, really excited to have you. So if you don't mind, just introduce yourself, your career. I know it's a huge one, so you go for it. Welcome, Aaron.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me, Bob. I'll do the condensed version here for the sake of keeping us on track and not boring our viewers. But yeah, I'm coming up on 20 years here in the industry. I started early on at an ad network, one of the first ad networks called L90, working in a sales role there. And then that company got bought or acquired other companies 5 times in my 4 years there. So I never actually changed my location. I was in like the same desk, actually just a few blocks down here in Chicago, down on Wacker. But we got acquired by the Excite Network, and then by Ask Jeeves, and then by IAC. So kind of all those early .com
These
names.
are like ancient names I haven't thought in a while. Yeah, Ask Jeeves. Good.
Oh yeah. And I've saved all the swag too. I've got like, you know, the butler and, you know, the shirts. And so, you know, I should plug my eBay store for the merch. No, I won't do that. And then from there, I helped start Resolution Media. So one of the first, at the time, focused on search engine marketing agencies. But then over time, we expanded to all forms of marketing, got acquired by Omnicom. And so that was a fun period. From there, I went off on my own for a couple of years. I started a company called Connectual. I wrote a book, Everything I Know About Marketing I Learned from Google, still available on Amazon. Although I must say I've learned a few things since then. And then I joined Kenshu as the CMO. That was back in 2010, if I've got my timing right. Spent about 5 years there at Kenshu, and then came over to 4C, so coming up on 5 years here at 4C. And here we're doing everything from social to e-commerce to TV to OTT, and we've built a platform that puts all these channels together into one self-serve tool for video-centric marketing, and that brings us up to speed.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, I remember like as your background, especially back in early 2000s, you remember we used to have sessions at the conferences that the future CMOs will have a lot of search background. I'm not sure if you remember, right? And here we are in 2019, you and many others who have gone the background from search and who understand the digital world so well, and you live that life and you're living that life, so super exciting. But I'm sure like Ask Jeeves and all that, you've seen so much of changes when it comes to digital. You know, back in the day, what we used to call it e-marketing, e-business, online, all those kind of things, right? But what is the biggest shift or change you've seen, at least in the last 10 years, you know, discounting the search and all those stuff?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost been things coming full circle, where I think what was fundamentally different and what made search such a high growth channel was that it changed the way that we thought about how brands can reach people. Prior to that, it was all based on context. So whatever page I was on the web, or channel I was on television, or page in the magazine, or the title of the magazine, that was what we used as inputs to put plans together. I want to reach someone who is a sports fan. I'm going to advertise on ESPN, maybe, you know, radio, print, television, and in digital. And what search taught us is that we can parse some of that out and begin targeting people based on what they're looking for at a given moment. And that changed the way we really thought about how we can connect with our audiences and what it means to be in the moment with our marketing. Mm-hmm. And then from there, then we had the whole sort of programmatic era, where we went all the way down to, you know, targeting people at these very precise nano moments with very precise messaging. And then social came along and added a whole different set of things that we can target based on what people are interested in or who they're connected to. And now here we are coming into 2020. It's almost like we've come all the way back now to where context is really important again. We've over-optimized and over-indexed on this precision marketing, and we've built essentially a house of cards based off of cookies and all this data that is getting tougher to manage, in some cases getting illegal to use and apply. And so some of what's old is new again in terms of how we think about where our audiences are and what's the right way to reach them and engage them.
No, that's so true. I mean, we recycle things, but I think somebody always used to say the search people are the utility players because we knew it, how it works, and now you look at it from a really wider optic, But it's great because when I look at leaders like yourself, there are so many marketing leadership lessons. So I want to focus a lot on that today. So, I think as we discussed, we can talk about the 7 leadership, digital marketing, or marketing lessons. And so I think we can just walk it through. And then, I think we can start with the 7 P's for marketing lessons. So that's what I want to focus on and just get your insights. So Aaron, let's start with the first P. How original, right? So what is the first P when it comes to 7 marketing leadership lessons?
Yeah, the first is people. No matter what stage you're at in the life cycle of your company, your role, your market, having the right people is critical to success. And that is both in terms of attracting talent, but more importantly, keeping them engaged, putting people in the right roles to play to their strengths, but challenging them just enough, being able to put your ego aside so that people can bring new ideas to the table, creating an environment where there is collaboration, and then ultimately helping people find ways to hold themselves accountable so that you as the manager don't have to be the one, it's not always about, cracking the whip, but creating a framework where your people can really flourish because they know exactly what's expected of them and they know within what guide rails they can operate and just go and do what they do best to push the organization forward.
Yeah, that's great. And we all talk about people, and I think at 4C Insights, you build a cool brand. But what are some of the things you do or you advise people to attract talent, especially in this time of the 2019 we are in, where anybody who wants to work can have a job, if you will, right? So what do you do to attract good talent, and those A players or B players that you can convert?
Yeah, well, I think the key is, another word for people is persons, and I think the lesson is to keep it personal. That's what I always try to do is get to understand people on a personal level, all the way from the first interview to the first anniversary, really showing an interest, taking an interest, and treating them as people differently, right? Because everyone is their own person, and the way that you manage one person won't work with another. You have to know what makes them tick, what they're really motivated by, what their personal passions are outside of work, so that you can help, foster and create an environment where there's enough balance where people are going to get excited to come in every day, but then can continue to work on themselves because they'll bring their best selves to work every day if they're feeling that and they're getting that support from their manager.
Yeah, that's so true. That's great. So that's a great first P, and which is people. What is the second P?
Well, the second P is process. So once you've got the right people in, and maybe not necessarily in the right seats, but at least everyone's on the bus. Now you got to figure out a process by which everybody can operate consistently. It goes back to what I just said about how you hold people accountable, and that's with setting very clear objectives for the team and then translating those down to the individual level, and then creating a structure by which everybody can be aligned towards that common goal. And so it could be, the process there's a lot to unpack there, and it could be anything as tactical as the project management software that you use to kind of, keep, everybody clear on what's the next step and who has to approve certain things, all the way through to just how you communicate. Are you an email-driven culture, phone? We use a lot of Slack here at 4C. We try to actually, in some ways, I think the best process is very little process.
Right.
So we try to keep things much less formal so that everybody can over-index on just doing the work versus thinking about how we manage the work.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good. I think one of the things that scaling tech companies face is, you can have processes, but if you don't make it into a habit, it won't work. So have you seen any specific instances where you've created processes, and how do you convert them into habit? Like what kind of, if you have any examples?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is where we have a weekly team meeting, and it started as sort of a status type of meeting, and everyone would come in and we'd go around the table and, what's everybody working on? And it seems trite, but we needed that at first. When we were first bringing people in, everyone was kind of new, and we had to make sure that everybody knew what everyone else was doing. But then we got to a point where it's like, okay, we're in each other's heads now. We now have some process to be able to keep track of some of these moving parts. We don't have to spend our time in person actually just running down and reiterating what we've already done or what we're doing next week. We can start to dig in on where are some of the things where we need to have discussion or brainstorm. And I think in that case, it became very clear when the time was right to turn our weekly from just a status meeting into a true collaboration session.
That's great. That's great. That's amazing advice. Great, great. So we got people, we get process. What is the third P?
Third P is planning. So now we have the people and the process to operate within. How do we put a plan together that's ultimately going to help the company meet its objectives? In our case here, from a 4C perspective, the marketing team is very focused on helping attract new customers to come on to our platform and also retain and grow our current customers. So, like many other B2B marketers, we are very focused on supporting revenue and helping drive customer satisfaction. And so the plans that we put together have to be very precise in supporting the goals of the company, and in particular the revenue and client service teams. And so there's any number of tactics that we can try, and when we put a plan together, we try to be fluid about it. We do set annual plans, I'm sure like many companies, but we don't get locked in. And we're always making changes on a daily and weekly basis based on what's working, what's trending, and if some of the other business realities are changing as well in the environment. And so I think the main takeaway from a planning perspective is first you have to have a plan, because it has to be something everyone can anchor on. But then you have to have enough flexibility built in so that as the business needs change, you can begin to shift and adapt accordingly.
Nice. And then do you measure people based on those objectives, like, objectives, key results, kind of, yeah?
Yes, OKRs are a big part of our culture here. We do anchor on those. We set them quarterly and discuss them no less than weekly. And so, yes, everyone has their individual OKRs that ladder up to a departmental OKR, which ladders up to a company OKR. And we're a very transparent culture, so everybody's OKRs are visible. And we're always, as we check in, we actually use a platform called 7 Geese to implement our OKRs, and everyone can see everybody's, and we can see how we're tracking along, and we can watch the little goose flying across the screen as we're marching towards our goal.
And that's I think one of the best ways to align. What you said is aligning at an individual department and a business level. So that's great, great. So, okay, we got people, we got process, we got planning. What is the next P?
Fourth P is product. And here, from a marketing perspective, you may or may not have ownership over product development. In my case, I don't. I have a great partner, Anupam Gupta, who's our Chief Product Officer, who looks after the product both in terms of thinking ahead to roadmap and just making sure current capabilities are there. But there's a lot of cross-pollination between our teams and our outputs. We're on the front lines out there in the marketplace, looking after the positioning, understanding what other folks are doing. And so as we can bring back those inputs to the team, we can have a big hand in helping shape how this product delivers for our customers. I think anyone in marketing who does not have a vested interest in product won't have a very long career in marketing. And it doesn't have to, we're a technology company. Your product doesn't have to be, something tangible that's, actually like, in a box, or in our case, software. Your product could be the team. If you're working for an agency, and you're selling a service, that is your product. And so how do you shape that in a way that where the value proposition becomes very clear, and how you can continually remind people the benefits you're delivering to them? And so that's probably my biggest take on this P is that we need to think about it, each interaction with the product. How is that helping reinforce your brand and reiterate to the customer how they're getting value? And there's lots of ways you can take that. In our case, we just try and be very thoughtful about each interaction, each screen within the platform, each invoice that somebody gets. How is that helping make the brand come to life and ultimately drive satisfaction?
So that's like integrating your customer experience at a super granular level, and that's how you can build the process, right? I mean, a product. But how much of inputs does marketing, your organization, give to the product team, and how do you create that trust level, between the two?
Yeah, great question. So I think it kind of goes back to some of the values that I'd shared, just as it relates to things like transparency. We'll get to one of our P's coming up around purpose. We're all aligned to a common purpose. We recruit and attract and retain talent based around our 4 kind of key values. And knowing that we're all kind of cut from the same cloth and focused on prioritizing the same types of things helps create that trust upon which we can build. So when you come into a room, egos are aside. We're all going for the same thing here. Let's bring the ideas in. Let's find ways to help each other out. But I think in some ways we talked about what's old is new again. I think a lot of it just comes back to good old-fashioned FaceTime. Our product team is distributed. Anupam, who I mentioned, in Seattle. We have product folks in Colorado, Ohio, New York, Chicago, the Netherlands. So making sure that Arizona, all great places to visit.
Finally, one warm place, right?
Yeah. And so there's also California. Yeah, that's speaking of nice places. And so just making sure that you can have FaceTime with these folks and connect with them on a personal level, so that it's not always just about what's the next thing on the agenda or the spreadsheet or the roadmap, but actually let's form a relationship and find ways to help each other out. That ultimately translates into the best possible product.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, okay, we covered that. What's the next P? I believe the 5th P, right?
All right, yes. The 5th P is packaging. And so here it's thinking about how you've taken what you've built, and that can be inclusive of, people, process, products, and packaged it up in a way where the value proposition is immediately obvious, very clear, and benefit-driven, right? And this is where you're putting on the hat of your customer and thinking, okay, what's something that they're going to respond to? In our case, I'm actually quite fortunate because my audience, my customer is me. It's the CMO at other companies. And so I have, in some ways, a unique insight. We're not always so blessed to work, to market products where we're the intended target audience, right? Sometimes, you might be working on the P&G account, and, you might be, in your early 20s and trying to, market diapers to, people who are, 10, 20 years at a totally different stage in life. And so you have to really work hard to get in their heads and say, all right, what makes them tick? In my case, I don't have to work as hard, and I can say, all right, what would attract my attention? Just like everybody else, we're very busy, time's at a premium, the inbox is full, and so how do you break through in that environment and really get a message that's authentic and connects? And that's where the packaging comes into play, and it's everything from the words you choose to the visuals to the overall way that you tell your brand story. And if you can get that right, sometimes you can even overcome some things that might be lacking in the product itself. If you can package it up, I'm sure you can think of this even just in something you might have ordered, off of Amazon or Target or Walmart, another insert retailer here. If it comes in a nice enough package and it feels premium and you feel like you got a good deal, even if it doesn't do exactly what you thought based on the product description or the reviews, your satisfaction can still be high.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole packaging thing. And again, I think one of the key takeaways is what you mentioned in product. It doesn't have to be a physical product. So even if you're a tech company or a software, when you say packaging, it means across the board, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a physical packaging that people expect out of Apple products. So, so true. All right. point number 6. What is the next P?
Well, I may have had a spoiler alert earlier, but this is where purpose comes into play, and making sure that the culture you've built is purpose-driven. And, at the end of the day, in B2B marketing, unless we're working for a healthcare organization, we're probably not saving lives. But that doesn't mean that what we do is not important. You can't get excited about it and feel passionate about it. And so that could be anything from the way that you have structured your organization, things like benefits, things like give back days, or even just in the way you carry yourself as a manager, and making sure that people understand that you care about them and your values are shared values, and that you stand for something and you can align everyone around that. I think this is something that 10, 20 years ago, certainly when I first started out, this wasn't something that people talked a lot about or thought a lot about. In fact, to the opposite, it was like, leave that at home. Don't bring any of your, personal passions or purpose-driven core values, to the workplace. It was almost taboo to talk about. Now it's like if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing, and people don't, have no interest in you. And so you can think about it in terms of broader societal issues, but even just at a micro level, having a vision within your organization, being very clear on what it is you're trying to do and why that creates value for some people in the ecosystem, that can be enough to really rally and motivate people. Or in our case, you might find some interesting ways where, I actually have to amend my comment earlier about we're not saving lives here. We just had a team of our folks who are walking down by the Chicago River, which is
right.
Just across the street here, and there was someone in distress, and they stopped and they helped that person and performed. Was able. Well, I'll leave some of the details out, but needless to say, I can now say we actually are saving lives here at 4C. So nice. I feel pretty good about that.
So karma points for that, right? For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I had a tough time. I used to work for a financial services company. I'm sure you know, and it's tough to find a purpose when you're trying to get people in debt every day, right? And so that's always, but I think you're right. It's so purpose-driven, right? It starts with the Tom shoes moment, and people want to buy into it, and people are more than willing to buy into one of these purposes, and they want to work for companies like that. So when you look at growing companies or scaling companies, when does the purpose as a company you try to put, or you create your purpose and then you make it, okay, these are the values, this is what you start. What is that tipping point in terms of employee size or revenues, or have you seen any correlation in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to start all the way at the beginning, because that's how you're going to build the team of people that are going to want to support your mission, are going to be ones who support your purpose. And if you can be clear about what that is from the beginning, you'll have the best chance to bring on the right people who will carry you to the subsequent phases of your life cycle as a business. I don't think it's ever too early to come out with that. You have to understand, too, that might change over time. It might adapt. You may have to pivot, or in some cases just, make some slight tweaks, and you have to be okay with that. Actually, one of our core values here at 4C is adaptability, and the ability to, when confronted with constraints, be flexible enough to work your way around and make the necessary adjustments. And so we look for people who are comfortable with change, because we know that change is inevitable, and we look for people who turn that into opportunity and thrive off of that.
So a lot of out-of-the-box thinking, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, so I'm wondering, you haven't talked about dollars, ROI, and as a marketer, if we don't talk about that, so I'm guessing, is that your last P, which is the 7th P?
Yes, intentionally last is profit, not because it's least important, but because if you've done all these other things well, I think you will find yourself in a way where you're delivering profit for your organization. And again, profit's going to be, mean different things in different contexts, but ultimately the financial responsibility, the growth, or whatever it is to your organization that you're being held to is a function that at the end of the day we're all going to be judged on, and you can't run from it. I think from our standpoint, I've always tried to think through my plans and build a visibility for our organization as a revenue driver. Marketing is not an expense. We deliver revenue, and I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can make sure that we've built all the right mechanisms such that each activity can be tracked and associated all the way through to revenue. So we have a proprietary scoring model and a bunch of different systems we've integrated so that in any given time I can say, all right, here's what marketing is spending across all our various activities, and here's how that's delivering on leads, opportunities, ultimately close one business, and then growth and upsell from current clients. And so there is no doubt a core part of marketing leadership that is delivering on that, but I think also the way that you manage that process
Right.
and the way you give visibility to your team and your peers into how you're actually doing on that front is half the battle. The other half, of course, is hitting the number.
Right, right. So there is one direct attribution is how many leads, deals that marketing gets in, but is there any other attribution like product development, customer support that makes a marketing a revenue driver as opposed to just an expense department? Have you seen some things around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of intangibles, right? It could be anything from the brand perception, even just through to client health. We measure Net Promoter Score, and that goes back to the thinking through each interaction with the product and making sure that that gives off an ultimately satisfactory experience. Those are all things that can play and that aren't direct revenue metrics, but are going to contribute to profit because you're either going to keep your clients happy and they're going to stay with you, or you're not and they're going to leave. So that all has to be taken into account.
Nice. No, that's great. That's great. So let me repeat the first 7 P's. The first one is people. The second is process. The third is planning. Then you got product. Then you got packaging. Then you got purpose. And finally, the profit. Is there anything that you would like to add that probably would help marketers as they go in this journey beyond 7 P's?
I guess number 8 would have to be party, right? If you've done all those 7, then there's only one thing left to do.
And I think you have this great rap created today for this party that you're going to share with us. Is that right?
I mean, if you're going to call me out, I'm going to have to do it. These aren't things I ever prepare, so you got to go freestyle. And I'll even let you, Bob. Yeah, you give me, give me a couple words to work in so that people know that this wasn't planned.
All right, so let's talk about Riverside, Chicago.
All right.
Here we go. I should say, sorry.
That's okay.
Nice.
Yo, it's AG here at 4C in Chi-Town, coming through clear as can be. I got my AirPods on. I'm rocking the mic. We got 7 P's to do what you like. Profit may be last, but it's important too. And the other thing that I'm going to impart on you is that 8 parties going to happen, going to take it on down, and we're going to go back to the bottom and come back to the top, because when I do it up, I do my funky hip hop. I like to ride it on down. I cruise on my boat, Chicago River. I got the most, the high, the ROI, and I reach for the sky and I dive down low in the wave, and I got to go. Peace.
Nice. Give it up for my boy, Aaron. Great job, Aaron. This is great, Aaron, and I think, our audience is going to love listening to this, but thank you so much for doing this and taking the time, and of course, the freestyle. Who can forget that, right?
Right on. Thanks, Bob. My pleasure.
Thank you.